All right, now it's time for an exercise. So open up our Vidly project. Let's see what part of this application is a great candidate for unit testing. So let's open the middleware folder, look at the admin module. Here we have a simple middleware function with two execution paths. Here's one, here's another. However, in this function, we are working with external dependencies. That's the request and response objects here. When unit testing this function, we don't want to send a real HTTP request here because that would be an integration test, not a unit test. Now here, if we really want to unit test this function, we have to mock the request and response arguments here. So we need to create mock objects that have the same interface as the request and response objects in Express. For example, the response should have the status method. It should also have the send method. So we have to do a lot of mocking, and this makes our unit tests very fat and unmaintainable. So it's better to test this function using an integration test, and that's the topic for the next section. So as a general rule of thumb, use unit tests for testing functions with algorithms that have zero or minimal dependency to external resources. Try to avoid creating too many mocks. If you're doing too much mocking, it's better to write an integration test. So the same applies to testing all our route handlers. So here in the routes, take a look at customers' routes. Again, here we're dealing with this request and response. To test this, we need an integration test. So we'll look at this later in the next section. So what can we unit test in this application? Well, look at the models folder. Open the user module. Earlier we created this method, generate authentication token. Look, we have a simple method. We have zero dependency to external resources. In this method, we simply generate a JSON web token and return it. So we can call this method using a unit test, get the result, verify it's a valid JSON web token, and in the payload we have these properties. So unit tests are ideal for testing a function like this. We are not working with any external resources like a database, a file, and an HTTP request, so we don't have to do any mocking. We simply call this function and verify the result. Unit testing this function is far easier and faster than writing an integration test that sends an HTTP request to one of our endpoints and exercises the entire application stack. So go ahead, write a unit test for this function, and next you will see my solution.